Hey, it's Neil Parfit here. Well, I'm giving in. You guys have asked for months and I'm going to deliver. So here is the tour of my studio. And look, I do have to say, I know I have a lot of gear in my studio, and no, you don't need all this to get your work done. Part of this is critical stuff I need to absolutely do my work. Part of it is because I prefer it, but it's not 100% necessary. And some of it is absolute passion project that I just love, and I'm in here and I love to tinker, and why not make the most of it? I've spent a long time in this business, almost 20 years now. So a lot of money I've made in this business, I've reinvested it into the studio, and I have no guilt doing that. So yeah, I mean, you can use your laptop, you can use an iMac, you can use a PC. It doesn't really matter as long as you deliver on time for your clients or you get the results you need. So also, because I'm going to be going around the studio a lot, the sound and video is going to be from my iPhone just because I'm going to be moving around. So it's going to switch from this look to the look I had before. But for now, that's unavoidable. I didn't want to go get a stabilizer to show you the studio. So it's going to be handheld, guerrilla style. All right, let's get to it. All right, so welcome to Mission Control. You guys have seen this shot before. This is my primary position when I'm working. This desk is custom. I had it made by a company called 2egress.com, and Brock and Dion are absolute geniuses. I basically gave them an insanely detailed scribble, and then they made it beautiful and came up with this. The great thing about it is that it is on a sit-stand platform, so it can actually raise to standing level if I really wanted to. But I feel kind of weird standing while working. It feels like you're in the kitchen, you know, chopping vegetables or something. So instead, I use it if I have to get under the desk and wire something. I can raise the desk really high and like sit in my chair and wire stuff instead of lay on the floor. So there's three sort of modes of working. And the first one is, number one, you're completely in the box, and the box is the computer. All your processing, all your mixing, everything is done in the box. There's number two, there's a hybrid system where you're doing some stuff in the box and you also have outside equipment. And number three is like pure analog, no computer, but number three is pretty rare these days. This is number two. I use a combination of computer processing and outside equipment that is analog and a mix of digital. So let's take a look and see what I have on my desk. So this right here is a Neve Summer. It's an 8816. Takes 16 channels from the computer, sums it all together, makes it sound kind of Neve-y, which is a nice kind of sound, and I can record it back into the system. All the stuff around it are auxiliary sort of peripheral analog processors. So I have some compressors here, solid state logic mix bus, which is pretty much the glue you've heard on every album since the mid 80s. The TG1 limiter is a compressor. I have a TC Electronics meter here for my 5.1 signals. This stuff right here is by Dangerous Music. I have a 2-channel converter, which takes the final mix from the Neve, digitizes it, and puts it back into the computer. A Bax EQ is a mastering EQ, and the Dangerous compressor is a mastering compressor. And they all just modify the signal in some way to make it sound better. Well, and that's the idea anyway. Right over here is a Dangerous Music Liaison. It's another analog switcher, so I can pick the order of different processors in my system. In this case, I use it to control mid-side processing, which gives me separate control of the sides and separate control of phantom center content. So more of a mastering thing, but I have it set so if you have processors on the bottom row, it's working in mid-side, and if it's on the top row, it's pass-through. This is usually used for EQs and some compressors and stuff like that to sweeten the sound. Above that, this is an Aurora Audio EQ GT4-2 made by Jeff Tanner in Hollywood. It's a beautiful sounding EQ. And above that is a Flock Audio patch. And that allows me to digitally control the routing of all the gear on my desk, as well as all this stuff down here from the computer in like a drag and drop plugin sort of style. And it's awesome. It's like my favorite piece of gear I've bought in the last 5 years. It's so good. The side rack, additional processing, Bricasti M7 reverb, sounds fantastic. Eventide H8000 FW, a little bit older, but it sounds amazing still. Below that is an Overstayer modular channel, compressor, EQ, harmonic distortion. It sounds awesome. Below that, this is like an old faithful The Waves Max BCL, this is your ultra maximizer. How loud can you get your track? You slam it through this thing and it sounds great. At this point, I usually use it with my synths just to add some subharmonics with the max bass processor right here. Below that, I have two Aurora Audio channel strips, GTQCs. So it's a mic preamp like a Neve 1073, as well as a dynamics channel. And I have two of them, so you can run them in stereo. I usually jam my synths through this, and it sounds awesome. I keep saying awesome, but yeah, that's why I really like using this outboard analog electronics. It just adds a certain quality to the sound. And I know that's that same old tired thing, but you can really hear the difference when you A/B it. And I'll get to that in another video, I guess. Below that, Blackmagic multi-dock, and that just has 4 of my SSDs for immediate quick access without having to jump under the desk. This was made by Art for the Ears, and I'll show you in a second. They also made my modular case as well. David Slursh, awesome workmanship. Same with Brock and Dion with the desk. Nothing negative to say. They're just fantastic people. But I gotta have more cowbell. Catbug, yeah. Along the wall over here is a Hartman Neuron. Unfortunately, it's dead. 15 years ago, this thing came out and it sounded really wild. It was a surround sound synthesizer, used like neural network models and stuff, but the main board is fried, so it's dead. It's never coming back. But it's a cool wall piece anyway, because it was just such a rad machine when it worked. Beside that in the corner is a Korg Z1. It's a physical modeling synthesizer. Every so often, I pull that out as well. It just sounds really cool. But a lot of that stuff I can do in software. So monitors, Genelec 1038s. They are really big for this room, but sometimes you come across one of those Craigslist specials that you can't say no to, and that was the case with these things. So they are way too big for this room, but with the Trinoff Demon 6 monitoring controller, they are calibrated. The room is calibrated to 79 SPL, so I won't blow my ears out with these things. My center speaker is a Genelec 1032. So that's a 10-inch driver. And I think from one of my videos in the past, I mentioned that I have these little Yamaha NS10 minis. And they sound terrible, but they're a real world reference, and my ears won't get tired listening to those versus the big ones. Big screen running 4K, my primary screen running 4K, and this side Dell monitor running 4K. So basically everything I ever need to look at any one time is up on the screen. So I can have my digital picture up there, my primary writing system here, and all the side apps and charts and monitor control and routing, all that stuff can just sit off to the side. So it's there if I need to glance at it. One of my mentors, Amin Bhatia, once said, if it's not in front of you, you'll never touch it. And he's absolutely right. So you can notice that everything I'd want to grab in the moment is right in front of me. So I have my keyboard. Right above that is my keyboard and mouse. I got my primary sort of mix and master controls all at hand's reach. And I have a single fader these days because I used to have 24 faders and now I'm down to 1, and I get my work done just as quick. So it was irrelevant having all that stuff sitting on my desk. I'd rather populate it with some high quality analog outboard instead. And this is a Ward-Beck 32ME MIDI meter. And this shows me up to 32 channels of digital playback. So I usually use it for seeing my 5-1 mix, a stereo fold, and up to 8 stereo stems. And that way, at a glance, I know that everything's going to where it has to go, and I don't have to like open another window in Pro Tools to double check. I can just see it here. But we'll get into that later. This right here is a Griffin PowerMate. This is controlling my Trinnov monitor controller. This little iPad is the actual interface for the monitor controller. So you can see this actually controls my volume. I can switch between my different speaker sets on a touch of the button. And I can pick all my different monitoring sources. I can pick my 5.1 in Pro Tools, stereo, my mastered stereo coming back from all the analog stuff. I have my stereo coming back from Logic. I got Logic's Dialogue and a click track from Logic. And I can actually sum these together and choose to hear all these at the same time. And because they all have their own dedicated pipelines, I'm never accidentally adding dialogue or click to my mix by accident. They have their own dedicated pipes right to my speakers. So very handy. This will change. Trinnov is releasing a dedicated remote, so I will end up losing this and this for a little controller that's about half the size of this thing that does the job of both of these. So again, streamlining over time. is always a good thing. There is Domo, just making sure the knobs are set correctly. All right, so moving over to the insanity, and I know this is absolutely ridiculous, but this is my modular synthesizer. And I don't even know if I can fit it all in one camera shot. We're gonna try and do it. No, I can't. Anyway, this is a Eurorack synthesizer, and it's a massive system. It's taken years and years and years and years and years to set this up. The cases are made by Art for the Ears, David Slur. She did a fantastic job based on my napkin scribbles. It's in 3 sections. I have the center section with some prop replicas from Back to the Future of the whole time drive travel circuit, flux capacitor, the plutonium dials. I figured, you know what? It all runs at 12 volts and the modular runs at 12 volts. So there isn't a more perfect place to have a time machine than in the synthesizer because it's just so insane. Anyway, this is a mix of so many things from around the world. Probably every major country is represented with a module here. There's stuff from Japan, from Germany, from France, from England, from the States, from Canada. It's like everywhere. This is sort of my blank palette. I'm going to paint stuff sonically, and I build a lot of sounds that composers will use in their movies, soundtracks, and sculpting sounds on here is way more rewarding just from a sonic perspective and from a happiness perspective working in the studio. The results of this thing sound amazing. So like most synths, it is sort of organized. There's oscillators, there's filters, there's effects and granular processors and controllers and joysticks. And for anybody who's not into this kind of stuff, this is like a Lego version of building sounds. So most of these modules do a specific thing very well, and you basically wire them all up individually through all the different little holes, and hopefully the end result sounds awesome. I find a lot of modular is you're sort of hunting to get to something cool, and half the time you sort of fall flat, but once you reach that eureka moment, it's very rewarding. And I love building my own sounds with this thing because at this point, everybody has access to the same software, so why not create my own sounds that sound a little different? And my clients appreciate that as well. So that's what this whole thing is for. It's been in some Hollywood blockbusters, TV stuff, some cartoon stuff. There's been sounds built on here for all that. So this is my happy playtime place, and clients love it. And I'm going to quote my mom again, because when she walked into the studio for the first time after I had had all this stuff built, she walked in here, looked at this, and said, "What the fuck is all this stuff?" So, yeah, you know you've gone overboard when your mom comments on how ridiculous your setup is. But anyway, it is also worth noting that the base of this thing I had built by a bunch of people building metal scaffolding for like an industrial facility. And I was like, hey, can you guys build a cart by these exact dimensions? And they're like, yes. So they built me this cart. It costs $600. It's solid steel, and it's like completely supported this whole long span. So it's a very clean look. Whereas before, this is 3 pieces, so I had it on 3 separate benches. So it was very difficult to get behind here to move things. So when in doubt, go custom, research things in the area, see who builds things, and I guarantee someone out there can build what you need. So this is a passion project, but I actually do use it to make money. Sure, I could do this kind of thing with the computer, but I much prefer doing it here because it's just way more organic. I still feel like this stuff sounds better, and it's just a completely different mindset when you have all this tactile control. Also, I have been in this industry a long time, and I'm very sick of staring at a computer screen. So if I can do work and bill for it and not stare at a computer screen, all the better. And this modular system is the perfect example of that scenario. So, synthesizer heads, don't freak out, but I am going to show you my passion project of hell. It's basically the most ridiculous wall of late 80s and 90s synthesizers you'll probably ever see, aside from like famous people having this stuff. So, here we go. Oh, this is an absolutely insane passion project. It took about a year to do. And it all started because I was working on this show where they wanted me to spoof 80s and 90s. So why not source the original stuff? And Back in the day, like 20 years ago, or even before that, 25 years ago, this is the stuff in Keyboard Magazine that I drool over, and all of it was out of reach financially. Like at that time, like the VL1 was like $4,000 and like early 90s money, you know. This stuff was like unobtainium. But, you know, with the way technology goes, I was able to source a lot of this stuff, each under $500. So some of it was only a few $100s. So laughable romplers. We got some Ensoniq stuff. The Oberheim Matrix 1000. This one was actually Martin Gore's of Depeche Mode. I bought it on reverb.com. I have a certificate. I was very excited because Depeche Mode is one of my favorite bands. Some Casio phase modulation, EMU Morpheus, Planet Fat, Kawai K1R, an Alesis D4 drums, an Alesis S4 Quadrosynth. Like, these are all just hilarious now. Some classics, we got like a Yamaha TG77. This thing was almost unobtainium, a Yamaha VL1. It's a physical modeling synthesizer. You ever listen to any old Enigma records, like all those electronic weird flutes and things? Chances are it was probably this. This thing sounds amazing. Some oddballs, this one's really rare actually, a Technics WSA 1R. Yamaha EX5R, I used one of these in college extensively. Korg Triton rack. Yakai S5000, this thing is a workhorse. Before computers were fast enough to run huge orchestral sets, I knew people who had like 10 of these things. Like, this was the only way to do it. And if you look at the specs, there's only 256 megs of RAM on it. Whereas my computer now, 384 gigs. So technology has come night and day in 20 years. Yamaha TX802, it's an FM synthesis. This is a rare Kawai K5000 additive synthesizer. Sounds awesome for pads and stuff like that. This one was a little bit of a sleeper, the Yamaha FS1R, because FM synths had run its course, but now these kind of sounds are all over the place again. This is a rack mount version of a Korg Trinity, Korg 1W, which was my first workstation. Korg Wave Station. The Wave Station is what they use to make the famous Mac chime. Then we got some workhorses like the Roland 5080. We have a Kurzweil K2500R sampler. That's sort of a classic workhorse as well. And, classic hip-hop sampler, ASR 10 by Ensoniq. And if you ever watch Star Trek The Next Generation, the D50 or the D550 rack, all those cheesy bell sounds and synths, chances are it came out of this thing. So very classic. All right, moving up to the top, Studio Electronics SE1, sort of like a Moog Model D. We have a Moog Slim Fatty, sounds awesome for bass and leads and stuff like that. These are all more like virtual analog kind of things. We got like a Waldorf Micro Q. This is a classic, a Roland JP8080. This is one of my favorite synths. It's a Nordrack 2. It's just a beautiful interface, and all these are endless optical encoders. It's just beautifully executed. I love that thing. We have an EMU Proteus 2500. It's a Rompler. There's a Novation Supernova. There's a Waldorf Microwave XT. And then there's a Korg MS2000R at the bottom. So you might be asking, well, how do I control this all from the computer? And the answer is, I have these Motu MIDI interfaces. So each synth has a dedicated in and out to the computer. And they all go back to the computer by these converters down here. So each one of these is 32 channels, so 16 stereo pairs each, and then the last one's 8 stereo pairs. So I get 16 channels of the modular synth, and each one of these synths has a dedicated input going to the computer. And because I'm using modern tech, this entire setup and all this stuff gets to the computer with just that tiny clump of cables. Isn't that hilarious? It's all optical. And if this was 15 years ago, this would be like a cable clump, like a foot wide, literally. So it's amazing how modern technology can integrate the old stuff so much easier. This is my rear right surround speaker, and my left one is on the other side. And at the bottom here, this right here is a total oddball. It's a portable Walkman kind of thing from Panasonic, but it also has SCSI on the back of it. And if you're too young to know what SCSI is, you've missed the worst of computers. It's just, yeah, anyway, it's an old interfacing standard that was annoying to say the least. You had to set IDs for the drives, you had to terminate the drives, like it was just a pain in the ass. But anyway, I have some old Akai CD-ROM sample libraries I can pop into here, and I can load them up on the S5000. So kind of cool. I don't know how I found that. I think I found it on eBay or something, but I'm glad I found it. Right here are just some power switches. The entire wall and the synthesizers take 13 amps. So considering how much stuff is running back here, that's not that much power. And then right at the bottom here, these are Acopian rack mount power supplies, and that's what's powering the modular synthesizer. It's two 12-volt supplies with a lot of amperage. I just wanted to show you this. This is a trip of nostalgia for me. This is a Korg Trinity, and this is the rare black one that they only made in Japan, and I brought it back with me from Japan when I found it. And just to show you the absolute horrors of the 90s, this is an iOmega Jazz drive. This is a 1 gig hard drive on a cartridge, and it uses SCSI, which I hate. This little SCSI box is louder than my entire studio. Listen to that. Yeah, this little thing is louder than everything else in my studio combined. So what makes this keyboard so interesting is it's the first keyboard that offered digital recording directly into the sequencer that mere mortals could afford. So not like a Synclavier that cost $250,000 or whatever it was back in the early 80s. This thing came out in around 95. You could record 4 tracks of digital audio. You could plug in a microphone or like line instruments right into the back. You could pick a track, hit record, and it recorded it directly to hard drive. And that was huge for back in the day. And this is also the first keyboard to have a touchscreen on it. So I can literally just do this. So I have some old files and I've just been tinkering with this lately because this is the first major workstation I ever owned. So there's a lot of nostalgia with this thing. And basically I'm just sticking around because it's not like I have a lot of other things to do. It's kind of amazing because if you fast forward to now, this entire thing is pretty much an iPhone, and you can have way more audio tracks. And instead of 1 gig, my iPhone has 256. So again, it's one of those things where technology has just jumped by leaps and bounds. I still think this is a cool synthesizer, and it sort of resonates with my heart. I saved for a long time to buy one, and yeah, here we are. I'm now old, and I've rebought it, and it's mine. Anyway, so you can still hear that jazz drive. I'm just going to turn it off now. So that's not too bad considering everything in the studio is on. That one hard drive was louder than everything in here. Oh, and it's also worth noting my side baffles, as well as some of these ceiling baffles, they were made by waveacoustic.ca. And the 3 middle baffles I made myself on a patio like 10 years ago. I used to have a ton of them, but through various moves and stuff, I kept getting rid of them, and now I only have 3. And now I can't get rid of them because I love them so much. They're just sentimental to me in that way. And I think they look cool too. Also, speaking of building things, all this stuff is beautifully built. And then this back rack, I built myself with like $200 of materials. And you know what? It does the job great. It's solid as hell, but the workmanship, it's mediocre. But I'm not a woodworker, so it is what it is. You can see the worst of it right here. Oh, look at that. It was one of those things where I had time to kill, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to build this rack myself. And I applied my Lego skills mixed with structural engineering from grade 7 wood shop. And here we are. I have this massive rack holding all this vintage junk. So there you have it. This is my office. I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of this in the next video. I'm going to present it in 3 ways. 1, how do I think about how all this stuff works as I'm working? Which is actually simpler than it looks. Number 2, how is it set up internally with software and routing? It's a little bit on the medium side of complexity. And then 3, it's the deep dive, how everything is wired to the cable and diagrams and all that stuff, just so you can see exactly how I've deployed all this gear and how it all talks to each other so seamlessly. So until next time, see you later. Stay safe, stay sane in this whole COVID situation, and let me know what you're up to as usual. I find it fascinating hearing what everybody around the world's up to. So Keep it coming. Okay, see you later. Bye.